Hi, I'm John Prasinos, Editorial Director of Investing Daily and Chief Investment Strategist of Marijuana Profit Alert. Welcome to the latest installment of my Marijuana Insiders interview series. With me today is a very special guest, Sundie Seefried, CEO of Safe Harbor Financial, the leading financial services provider to the cannabis industry with clients in 40 states and U.S. territories. Financing is very important for cannabis companies. Many cannabis companies can't get access to mainstream financing, so financial capital companies such as Safe Harbor play a crucial role in the growing marijuana sector. Sundie, thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, John.
You bet. Let's get right to it. There are a lot of bills pending in Congress to lift the federal ban on marijuana. Do you think that in 2023, the federal ban will finally get lifted on marijuana?
I'm afraid I'm not that optimistic. I just when people ask me that question, I often go back to for 8 years we've been banking this business and working in this business and fighting this uphill battle. And how do you go from, 7 times of not getting safe banking passed to straight legalization? It's just not the way Washington operates. And I think with the divided Congress and the change and the fact they're going to be working on, a lot of other things that go in this bill or need to go in this bill, I think we might see a step forward, but not legalization.
What about safe banking? You mentioned the safe banking bill, which would make it easier for banks to provide mainstream banking services to canna-businesses. What sort of chance does that stand next year?
I think that has a much better chance. I think we've seen a lot of stalling happening already on it because, again, one of the things they really want to tie to this bill, and I spent a lot of time in DC in September actually talking to the senators' offices on this, is they want to right the wrongs of equity and hold banking hostage. And, they just don't all go together. You can't fix all the social injustice with banking. And so, therefore, I think that's going to get stalled unless some other things go into the bill. It's not that they're wrong, but the bill doesn't go far enough. It doesn't include 280E. It doesn't include, other things, and the industry really needs it, like bankruptcy reform. And I just think there's going to be too many hands in it, and I think that even the DEA has weighed in on it. So yes, I think some form of it will pass in 2023. I just don't think it will go far enough for the industry.
Okay. Sundie, let me ask you, what's the worst risk marijuana investors face in 2023?
I would say, the industry is feeling some pain and pricing compression at this point in time. And while there is a lot more data available for investors and a lot more analysts are covering the space, investors still have to understand the business they're getting into and research and the due diligence and the risk of not having due diligence that needs to be done in an equity pool or by the companies out there. So I think, understanding the business and knowing what's happening in the business is probably the biggest risk.
Let's segue to a fascinating ancillary industry to marijuana, psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca. They're becoming increasingly illegal on state and local levels. Medical researchers are delving into the medical and psychological treatment benefits of psychedelics. What are some of the salient opportunities, investment opportunities, that you see in the booming psychedelics industry?
I actually pretty bullish on the psychedelics and psilocybin. And in fact, I have updated all of our program documents to be able to jump in because I think a lot of the cannabis companies will actually see this as another line of business. It's very much different than the cannabis industry in terms of how they're going to set up this legislation, and so it's not going to be a retail product, and it's going to be a difficult investment. You've got to understand the different things that they're going to put in place. I think it's still too soon to say where the biggest opportunities are, but I would say it's going to follow along the lines of cannabis, except very, very different in terms of implementation and less risk, I think.
It seems that Big Pharma is trying to get into the psychedelics industry in a big way and is devoting a lot of research dollars into researching LSD and the psilocybin, the psychoactive ingredient of magic mushrooms. Do you think Big Pharma will make big forays into co-opting or absorbing the psychedelics industry?
I think that's an interesting thought because one has to almost wonder if big pharma didn't follow cannabis soon enough or early enough, and so they're seeing psilocybin now. Maybe it's a good opportunity to get in earlier than later and have to fight the big MSOs for market share. Oh, I do see much more attention being paid to psilocybin. I've been doing my research, and the governor here in Colorado is putting a team together, and I've got the application to try to get on that team. And they're going to have the same problem with banking.
I tell you, with psilocybin in the mainstream now, with Silicon Valley executives touting the benefits of microdosing LSD and magic mushrooms, it's a brave new world. I never thought I'd live to see such a cultural revolution. That the mainstreaming of psychedelics drugs, which had been demonized for decades, it's fascinating.
They don't call, and in my research, they don't call the black market or the legacy market in psychedelics. They call it the underground market, but it is so much more available than people understand, I think, out there. So they're going to have the same issue fighting a underground market.
Yeah, that's right. It's like trying to fight the alcohol prohibition in the 20s. It's something people just want. So, um, tell me, do you see further consolidation next year in the marijuana industry? It's a fiercely competitive industry. A lot of smaller companies are getting scooped up by bigger players. Do you see intensified merger and acquisition activity next year?
I do, unfortunately. And I think this is one of the concerns that even some of the states like California, they wanted to protect the small guy, right? The mom and pops. And all of a sudden seeing this pricing compression and the competition and those who aren't vertically integrated are getting pushed out because they don't have control over, supply chains. And so I see a lot more in terms of going vertically integrated and MSO operations. The well capitalized are really taking advantage of this opportunity because raising capital in this market is very difficult at this point in time, and especially for the small guys.
Right. You mentioned MSOs, multi-state operators. Um, One thing I'm seeing is that MSOs are really achieving dominance in the East Coast with certain states, such as New York, major states legalizing marijuana. Do you see the East Coast as offering a big challenge to the West Coast, which has been the largest marijuana market hitherto?
Only because I think that there's so much more organized on the East Coast at this point in time, and on the West Coast we're still having problems getting things implemented. I think the one issue they're going to run into though is like in New York, there's this existing black market that's been allowed to stay and operate. And so how do you now say to your constituents in the state, let's use real cannabis from real shops that are really licensed and stop using this other supply chain that we've allowed to go on for years. It's going to be a real battle for New York. But I think that they are going about it in a much more organized way and could have a real impact on that.
You mentioned you broached a politically sensitive, interesting topic: the thriving black market. Despite legalization, we still see a booming illicit sales of marijuana, and that's largely because as markets become legal, lawmakers see a chance to tax marijuana, and they become addicted to the revenue, the tax revenue for marijuana, which makes legal marijuana more expensive than black market marijuana. Do you think that perhaps lawmakers, in their eagerness to tax marijuana, they could be killing the golden goose?
I do think that has to be given consideration. So if we go back to the legislation that needs to be considered, it has to look at 280E because that's crushing these businesses. They are literally banking on the future and not being able to take normal deductions if you want to continue to hit them with the tax demands. So yes, I think that we are creating an unfair playing ground for legalized cannabis businesses who want to do it the right way and produce a pure product. And I think that's the only big sell point. Why would you want to buy the illicit market when you can get something clean that's regulated? I do hope that that gets some consideration in the next year for the sake of the industry, along with access to capital markets. You know, as long as they can't get access to the capital markets, it's going to be difficult for them to actually compete on a global level, in my opinion.
You know, in your daily experience, you interact with all kinds of marijuana investors, marijuana companies, marijuana entrepreneurs looking for capital. What's the biggest mistake that you see in your experience? What's the biggest mistake that you see marijuana investors make?
Again, I'd have to go back to the due diligence aspect. No, there's two parts of that though. You want to be really careful with whom you're investing because illicit dollars want to get into this one way or another. And if I can't be an owner directly, I'm going to get myself in a pool with somebody else and hide so that I can get my illicit money into the pool. So I think you have to be really careful with whom you invest and make sure you not only know the companies, but you know your fellow investors if you're in a pool.
Sundie Seefried, CEO of Safe Harbor Financial, thanks for taking time out to answer my questions. It was very informative.
Well, thanks for having me, John. My pleasure.
You bet.